Welcome back to the channel. This will be the best differentials ahead of the new FPL season, and on screen you can see the most template pick in João Pedro, who has more than 60% overall. But every single player highlighted today will have less than 10% ownership, with the vast majority of them having less than 5% in general. So in every single position, goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders and forwards, you'll have plenty of options to tackle your mini leagues and rise up the rankings in a different way by competing against the template with some unique picks in every single position. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also the notification bell so you're always up to date with my content, whether it's for FPL or UC or fantasy. And check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships if you want to support my channel even further, and also to get many perks like early access to my videos. There's also the Discord server, FPL League and Spotify. There is so much there for you to check out. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. The first FPL asset with less than 5% ownership in this video is Trafford, who has completed a move to Manchester City, and he does rise up the rankings for goalkeepers after making that transfer. But there is still that possibility that Ederson takes game time off him, but Trafford is now the new #1, and Ortega has been told he can leave the club. So it should be Trafford up against Ederson for the next year, and I think over time Trafford will cement himself as the main goalkeeper long term for Manchester City. It starts off with Wolves away, followed by Tottenham, Brighton and Man United, but will Trafford start in the Premier League from the get-go, or will it remain Ederson for the time being? That's what puts me off Trafford a little bit, and I'd rather have more certainty between the sticks. But maybe in the next couple of preseason games we'll get great insight into how Pep Guardiola wants to field Man City. But there's always rotation in every single position, and over the last couple of years the goalkeeper area is no exception. Trafford kept 29 clean sheets for Burnley last season in the Championship alone, with 88 saves, 16 goals conceded, and also saving 2 penalties out of 2. His price tag is 5 million, and I think with FPL releasing a little bit later, they saw the rumours of Trafford to Man City and priced him accordingly. If they released the game even earlier, he would have been 4.5 million, and I think a lot of us would flock to him. Even if there is that element of rotation risk, you'd still just chance it, because a 4.5 million goalkeeper from Man City would be too good to turn down. So I think this is a fair price, and Trafford could be one of the best goalkeepers come the end of the season. The same goes for Petrovic, who has featured in other videos as well, and he applies to so many different categories like summer signings, obviously best goalkeepers as well, and it's one of my favourite options at 4.5 million, so he also classifies as a budget pick. His ownership is 5.2%. He kept 10 clean sheets in League 1 last season, making 111 saves and also conceding 38 goals. His goals prevented figure was actually very impressive at 7.91. That's one of the highest of any Premier League goalkeeper, but it's worth noting he played in a different league at that stage. You can argue that League 1 is far less competitive, but it's still one of the best leagues in world football. Liverpool away is tough, but I still think Petrovic is a good pick. And the same goes for Dalot at 4.5 million, facing Arsenal at home, then Fulham, Burnley and Man City. But Man United have looked fairly decent in the last couple of preseason games. They beat West Ham 2-1 and also thrashed Bournemouth 4-1, but Dorgu was the one who scored and assisted. And despite the fact that Dalot has been the best for bonus points and also amongst Man United defenders, he can get the odd goal or assist, so he can be a decent FPL option. It could be Dorgu this time round who steals the thunder a little bit, and you might want to go to that sort of area instead, or kind of classify and cover Man United defensively in a different way instead of Diego Dalot. But I think he's still a little bit of a decent option and a bit underrated here at this price tag, and with 2.7% ownership as well. He didn't get any single goals last season, but he did provide 4 assists with 9 bonus points and 97 FPL points overall. But Man United's fixtures are terrible. I think Heaven at 4 million could be decent, and you might want to go for him, and he was covered in my budget players video. But I'll probably avoid Man United assets, especially in that position, up until game week 7 or 8, when things get a little bit better. The likes of Mbumo, Cunha and Bruno Fernandes remain appealing, but Diego Dalot might be a wait and see. The same goes for Kilman, but he does face Sunderland away in game week 1, and he was an absolute machine with defensive contributions last season. He would have scored 30 points in terms of that metric, and that would have taken his tally from 82 FPL points all the way to 112. I think Wan-Bissaka is still slightly better. He might not get the same defensive contribution points as Kilman, but he's also going to get more attacking returns. But Kilman is still a decent option defensively to cover that West Ham defence. I think Wan-Bissaka is number one, but his ownership is also over 30%, and Kilman is the sort of differential way of achieving the same goal. And I think in terms of goals and assists, there might be a little bit of a drop off for Wan-Bissaka this season, and Kilman could close the gap there. At Wolves, he was a decent choice from time to time at 4.5 million, and at one stage, of course, when he first came into the game, he was priced at 4 million. So I think Kilman has always had FPL potential, and we could see it fully realised in the 2025-26 campaign. I think Mitchell is also a very underrated pick in FPL, and he is priced at 5 million this time round. He can get defensive contribution points, but also some goals and assists. He got 6 assists last season with 11 big chance created, no goals, but I still think the goal contributions in general is quite healthy because of his creativity. 123 FPL points is more than Lacroix and a few other Crystal Palace defenders, but if this defensive contribution point system was implemented in the last campaign, then Lacroix would have been superior to Tyrick Mitchell. But it's another way of covering the Eagles' defence. And in these difficult games against Chelsea, Nottingham Forest and Aston Villa, that could be where Mitchell scores the most points, even over plum fixtures like Sunderland at home. So definitely keep an eye on Mitchell. He's a decent choice. And Jurrien Timber could be one of the best defenders in Fantasy Premier League, but he wasn't in my top 20 list when I talked about the best defenders in FPL. I just think that Saliba and Gabriel will get more bonus points, and I could see Timber rotating with White from time to time. And let's not forget that before last season, Ben White was injury-free and one of the best right-backs in the country. He also offers more attacking threat than Jurrien Timber, so it might depend on the opponent, but Arsenal have that luxury, and Jurrien Timber was definitely overplayed last season off the back of that ACL injury he suffered in his debut campaign. In fact, in his Premier League debut against Nottingham Forest at home, but he has recovered very well from that stage. I think he is the first choice at right back. He can also play on the left-hand side and in central defence, so his versatility will mean he'll get 30 plus Premier League starts. If not, we could see a reduction in those minutes where maybe he plays some cup games and then gets a few rests in the Premier League because Ben White can play on the right. You've got Saliba and Gabriel in central defence, assuming that both of them are fit to start this season. But Arsenal have had a few injury problems in recent days. So Kepa Arrizabalaga missed the game against Tottenham Hotspur, where Arsenal lost 1-0. They also had Calafiori missing after he was subbed off against Newcastle due to an injury. So hopefully these players do return very soon. I believe Trossard is another one to keep an eye on, but he could be on his way out anyway during the summer transfer window. And I think Arsenal's defensive depth does give them a position of strength in those areas. The signing of Mosquera only bolsters that defensive line. They might have lost Tomiyasu, and a few other players might be outgoing like Zinchenko, and of course Cherney left a few months ago, but Jurrien Timber is still a decent choice. His ownership is 2.4%. He got 1 goal and 3 assists in the Premier League last season with 9 yellow cards, so he can also damage his potential for bonus points in the process, so be very careful about that. And that's why I do favour Saliba and Gabriel at 0.5 million more. But Timber's still got over 100 FPL points, and Arsenal have one of the best defences across Europe. And in terms of the Golden Glove, where David Raya has won the last 2, he will be the favourite to win it for a 3rd consecutive time, and that's mainly because of how solid Arsenal can be defensively. Bruno Guimaraes, though, is one of the best midfielders in the Premier League, with 5 goals and 6 assists in the Premier League last season, 12 big chance created, and 135 FPL points. You might want to avoid Newcastle players for the first 2 game weeks, especially with all the umming and ahhing about Alexander Isak potentially leaving the club. And if any updates do happen, it will be covered on this channel, and I can discuss the impact of Isak's FPL credentials if he were to move to Liverpool, and also how Newcastle could replace him with their own players right now. Osula has been playing as the main striker at the moment, and they can also play Anthony Gordon there, which they have done on several occasions in the past. But Newcastle will be in the market for 1 or 2 strikers, and let's see who they can land. Sesko's a possibility, and Vissa still remains on their watch list. But in the midfield, I think Newcastle have so much talent, and FPL-wise, Alanga, Bruno Guimaraes, Tonali, Anthony Gordon, even Jacob Murphy. You have so many options to choose from, and Bruno Guimaraes might be the very best of the lot with 1.4% ownership and a 6.5 million price tag, because he can mix goals, assists, clean sheet points, and also defensive contributions. He is one of the best defensive midfielders in the Premier League, but he can also play as a box-to-box, which is what he's primarily done at Newcastle, with Tonali sitting deeper. But Jacob Murphy is also here. He was outstanding last season and he scored against Arsenal in that high-scoring thriller. And I think Murphy is a very decent choice. He was really underrated. No one expected what he did last season with 159 FPL points. I would expect a downturn this season, but he can still comfortably get over 100 FPL points with all the underlying stats being quite strong, and that includes 16 big chance created. So that's even more than his teammate Bruno Guimaraes, who has the same price tag, and Murphy's ownership is also double at 2.9%. So definitely keep Murphy in mind. And the same goes for Enzo Fernandez, who can get some defensive contribution points, although Caicedo will get the bulk of them at Chelsea. But Enzo Fernandez will get more goals and assists than the Ecuadorian, and he can also play as an attacking midfielder, which we saw in the Club World Cup. 79 key passes is still very impressive for a 6-point family midfielder, and he was even cheaper in the previous campaign. The ownership is a little bit higher compared to the other options I've discussed up until this point at 4.4%, but he remains a differential, and Chelsea have great fixtures over the first 6 game weeks. They are top of the FDR, and Iwobi was yet another impressive 6-point family midfielder last season, and Fulham's fixtures are decent enough to take a punt on Raul Jimenez up front or Iwobi, but I think the Nigerian might be my favourite way of covering Fulham in general, with 9 goals, 6 assists, and an expected assist figure of 7.01. So there was a slight underperformance with the creativity, and we might see a downturn in goals this time round from Iwobi, but I think the assists could be up, and a lot depends on who they sign in the summer transfer window. They are linked with a few Arsenal players like Reece Nelson on a permanent transfer and Alexander Zinchenko, but I think Iwobi will be a good FPL asset irrespective of what Fulham do in the summer transfer market, and game week 4 looks really appealing against Leeds at home. So Iwobi should definitely be under consideration, and he's one of the best 6-point family midfielders in the game with really low ownership, just like Ismaila Sarr, who would be one of my very favourites overall. He was in my best midfielders list, and he was very streaky last season and quite inconsistent, but 8 goals and 7 assists was still a solid return. 18 big chances and 149 FPL points. I think he'll outscore the likes of Iwobi this season, but if you look at defensive contribution points, then Iwobi would have the advantage there, and then it's all about the goal contributions, and I do expect Sarr to improve both of those numbers with the goals and the assists. But the opening fixtures are quite tough for Crystal Palace over the first 3 game weeks. Then it gets much better, at least on paper, facing Sunderland at home. They just signed Granit Xhaka, and I think it's going to be quite difficult to predict certain games this season. But you would expect Crystal Palace to have a decent start, irrespective of how they did at the start of last season, where they were really poor and they grew into all competitions. They had a decent Carabao Cup run, they won the FA Cup and ended the Premier League very strongly as well. And Ismaila Sarr is one of their very best FPL assets, and he would be the number 1 attacker potentially if Eze were to leave. He is heavily linked with Arsenal. Mateta up front is still a very consistent option, but Sarr could offer the best value at 6.5 million. Amad Diallo scored in that 4-1 win against Bournemouth. He also has the same price tag, but I think the main downside of this pick is that he could play a lot of games as a right wing back, with Mbumo, Cunha and Højlund, or whoever United sign up front, being the main front three. So Amad Diallo could play a sort of secondary role offensively, but he can still get goals and assists from right wing back, and he showed that in pre-season already with 8 goals and 8 assists in the previous Premier League campaign, 49 key passes and over 120 FPL points. He scored a hat-trick against Southampton and has those moments where he can deliver to such a high level. The ownership is still quite low at 3.5%. It's Arsenal at home first, followed by Fulham away, Burnley at home and Man City away. But over the first 6 game weeks, you'd want to avoid Arsenal and Man United. There will be some exceptions, like game week 3 for Man United facing Burnley at home, and with Arsenal, Leeds at home in game week 2 is one of the main reasons why the free hit is being heavily considered so early on. Next up though is Declan Rice, who could be part of that free hit in game week 2. He had 4 goals and 7 assists in the Premier League, scored 2 brilliant free kicks against Real Madrid, and the goal contributions have definitely soared since he left West Ham, and he's played in a box-to-box role for Arsenal. But he can also play as a defensive midfielder, which is his main position. But irrespective of that, he can create so many chances from open play and set pieces, and that's why he created 17 big chances in the last campaign, which is more than Bruno Guimaraes, for example, and 127 FPL points could be even higher this time round, with defensive contribution points also playing a role. So Rice could end up having 150 plus FPL points either this season or the next, depending on what else FPL do in terms of new rules in the years to come. But Harvey Barnes will be a mega differential, and he might even start a lot of games for Newcastle with the departure of Alexander Isak, or at least at the time of this recording, potential departure. But it looks so likely right now, and could a front three of Jacob Murphy, Gordon and Harvey Barnes start this season? I think that's looking ever more likely, and they are in negotiations with multiple strikers, but nothing has been done just yet. But Barnes had 9 goals and 5 assists in the last Premier League campaign, and the XGI was quite healthy at 10.73. 130 FPL points was also higher than Declan Rice, and the ownership is even lower at 0.5%. He can score against Aston Villa and Liverpool, but you'd probably still want to avoid him in Game Week 2. And afterwards, it's Leeds away and Wolves at home, and that's where Newcastle look much more appealing. But their pre-season has been shambolic. They've lost every single game virtually, and they're also looking quite vulnerable defensively, which is something that we rarely see under Eddie Howe. But offensively, I still think their options look quite decent. That includes Harvey Barnes, of course, Jacob Murphy, Anthony Gordon, and a few other options that I will discuss in future videos. But Brennan Johnson scored the winning goal in the Europa League final against Man United. It's Burnley at home in Game Week 1, and if we don't see him start in the UEFA Super Cup final just a few days beforehand, then you'd probably have a good idea of Johnson starting in Game Week 1, and that's what would make him far more appealing. But his ownership is 3.1%. He got 11 goals last season with 6 assists and an XG figure of 10.49. So he does get a lot of big chances from the right wing, but Kudus will be first choice. So we could see Brennan Johnson shifted to the left or just go to the bench. And that's why Brennan Johnson will be less appealing than he was compared to last year. And that is probably enough to maybe put you off as an FPL asset. But I think we shouldn't completely discount him just yet. And there's a reason why he got 137 FPL points in the 2024-25 Premier League campaign. The price tag is 7 million, which is a little bit too steep in my opinion. I think 6.5 million on Kudus is far better value. And Dominic Solanke will be next in line in terms of the best Tottenham attacker overall. Spurs also have very good fixtures, and that's why James Maddison does feature here. He was a substitute against Arsenal and only played a few minutes. 9 goals and 8 assists, despite the lack of game time as well, was very impressive. Ange Postecoglou didn't really trust him enough, I think, in terms of fitness and reliability, but Maddison still did a job from the bench, and with the odd starts he was given, and the XGI, the expected goal involvements, was also incredible considering the minutes played, 11.55, and he also got over 130 FPL points. If he can somehow get more than 30 Premier League starts, I think Maddison could get close to 200 FPL points and be even better than Kudus, for example. But at this moment in time, I would favour the Ghanaian because of the 0.5 million cheaper price tag and also the minutes perspective. I think Kudus will start virtually every single game for Spurs in the Premier League, and there could be some exceptions later in the season. But with Maddison, he always has this sort of streak of starting the season strongly, then kind of fading away, and you could get an injury in between that, to be fair. But I think Maddison definitely has his best moments in the first half of the season, which might be worth starting with him actually in Game Week 1 and then getting off him after 8 game weeks or so. We have seen this pattern at Leicester, and over the years with Tottenham Hotspur, it hasn't really been any different under Ange Postecoglou, and we'll see what changes under Thomas Frank. But I think James Maddison is still a decent choice. Kevin Schad's ownership has actually halved since a few days ago. It's currently 2.1%, but he got 11 goals last season and also some massive returns. There was one against Leicester, for example, where he got 21 FPL points, 4 assists, 19 big chances, and 149 points overall. Makes him very appealing. And with Brian Mbeumo leaving the club, I think Kevin Schade will be relied upon even more. But also losing Christian Norgard, potentially Visser, their manager Thomas Frank. I think there's too many changes at Brentford, and it's quite difficult to gauge where they're currently at. But Kevin Schade should still be a decent FPL choice with over 100 FPL points. Could he better his tally from last season and get to 150? I think it's possible, and Brentford have solid fixtures, so it might be worth a punt with this differential. And if it doesn't work, you've got so many options at this price tag and below, like Matoma, Kudus, and many others I've covered across all my FPL videos. But we are getting close to the forward line. Before we do though, Justin Kluivert is certainly worth highlighting because I haven't really talked about him in recent videos. He's the main penalty taker for Bournemouth, who have lost so many key players in the summer transfer window, and his ownership has dipped from around 7.5% all the way down to 5%. He got 12 goals in the previous campaign, scoring a hat-trick of penalties against Wolves, which is a first in Premier League history, with 6 assists, 16 big chances, and 158 FPL points. I would expect a downturn in many of these stats, and I think Semenyo is the better option if he stays at Bournemouth with the shot volume and open play threat, but it's quite close between those two, and they're both priced at 7 million because of it. But Liverpool away in Game Week 1 is probably enough to kind of put you off Kluivert and most Bournemouth assets, and I wouldn't blame you for thinking that way. But Anthony Gordon is here at 7.5 million and 2.9% ownership. He hasn't really been good for a couple of months now. He ended the last season quite poorly, and in pre-season he has been underwhelming. He got 6 goals and 6 assists, so there was a massive downgrade from what he did in the campaign before that. The XGI was 13.12, so there was a slight underperformance, and I think Gordon could improve these numbers. He has taken a few penalties in Isak's absence, and he has missed pretty much all of them. 124 FPL points isn't too bad, but at 7.5 million, you can find better value elsewhere, either in the forward line or the midfield, and at cheaper price points, you've got Kudus and all these other players that I've talked about. Indai is yet another option who has been reclassified from a forward to a midfielder, being on penalties for Everton and actually converting them. So Anthony Gordon isn't going to be the most appealing FPL asset for a good reason, but from Game Week 3 onwards, you might want to take a punt in certain fixtures like Leeds away. So I still think he has something to offer. Now, Cody Gakpo is yet another choice who has been reclassified from a forward to a midfielder, and he's been quite impressive in pre-season, scoring twice, and I think he could be the main starter at left wing. But Liverpool could also play Szoboszlai there. There's also Ekitike who could be shifted to the left. Even Isak, if Liverpool get him, can play as a left winger, not to mention Florian Wirtz. So Gakpo won't be nailed on by any stretch of the imagination, but he could still get 25 to 30 Premier League starts, and if he does, we could see him near 200 FPL points, depending on how many goals and assists he can provide. But he got 15 goal contributions last season. The XGI was 10.79, and there were a few game weeks, I think around game week 25 to 28, where Gakpo was actually very appealing at one stage. There was also a few double game weeks which played a big part in that. Liverpool had the back-to-back doubles in 24 and 25, and Gakpo was actually talked about heavily in some of my videos. So we could see him be very interesting at some stage this season, but I think with Liverpool, you are going to gravitate towards Salah, Florian Wirtz, and any other players they may end up signing before the end of the summer transfer window. I think Odegaard had just a really poor campaign last season. There's no denying it, and we are expecting him to be much better this time round. Only 3 goals, 9 assists, and I don't know what happened to his open play threat and the finishing, because he set the all-time Premier League record for non-penalty goals scored by a midfielder with 15, and ever since that, his finishing has been atrocious. I still think he had a very decent season in the 2023-24 campaign, but what he did last year, I know the injuries played a big part, but that is not the real Martin Odegaard, and he has so much more to offer. Sometimes I'd like to see him play more on the left instead of always on the right, connecting with White and Saka, which is one of the main strengths that Arsenal have. But I think he also gets the best of the left winger when he does shift to the left, and he can find a few through passes. But he's still got 63 key passes in general, which isn't too shabby. 116 FPL points, and he had some good moments last season, like the brace against PSV Eindhoven in the Champions League. He also had a few really good games when he first came back from injury, but then tailed off quite quickly. The ownership is 3.3%. The price tag is 8 million. I would have expected him to be a little bit cheaper, and that would make you consider Odegaard over Saka or potentially Victor Gyökeres up front. But I think right now Odegaard is probably a bit lower down the list in terms of the best Arsenal attackers. And when you also introduce the defenders and David Raya into the mix, I don't think Odegaard cracks the top 5 Arsenal players in terms of FPL credentials, but that could change this season. There is a quality player in there. The same goes for Raul Jimenez, who still had a very healthy campaign last time out with 12 goals and 3 assists, and the shot volume is incredible for a player at this price tag. 96 shots, rivals the likes of Palm and Haaland, who are all into the 100 kind of zone. Salah's another one, and Semenyo, but Jimenez was actually one of the players with the most shots last season, and that's something that always bodes well for a striker. You just need the accuracy, of course, in any given game, and he can be quite frustrating. Against Southampton, for example, he blanked in both matches, despite having a great record against them throughout his career, but 147 FPL points is decent. The same goes for Fulham's fixtures. You would expect him to be the main number 9 starting there week in, week out over Rodrigo Muniz. And the signing of Nelson could also be really helpful to Raul Jimenez. And they've got some decent wingers and attacking midfielders, but they need to have a bit more, I think, in certain areas to really compete for the top half and those European spots. But Raul Jimenez will be crucial. We are approaching the end of this video. Strand Larsen is yet another budget option, but you could technically say he's just above that, and he's a mid-price forward, but the ownership is still low at 6%. 14 goals and 4 assists marked a very solid debut campaign in the Premier League. He got 23 big chances and 145 FPL points, and he was also quite decent for the bonus, and this will only improve, in my opinion, with Mateus Cunha leaving the club, so he's not going to hog all the bonus, and Strand Larsen can sometimes get maximum bonus points if he scores the winning goal for Wolves. And there are some tough fixtures in there, like Man City and Newcastle over the first 4 game weeks, and Vitor Pereira does have a very kind of weird track record throughout his career where he starts off really well, gets a managerial bounce going, but then over time it quickly fades away, and after a year or two he gets sacked. So let's see if that happens this time round. But he has gotten the best of Strand Larsen, there is no doubt about that. He had a few injury problems but still bounced back quite well, and I think Strand Larsen is arguably the best Wolves asset in FPL. And we can certainly say something similar about Danny Welbeck for Brighton, but Mitoma is probably my favourite Brighton asset, then it'd be Danny Welbeck, and then you're looking at De Kuiper at 4.5 million as one of their new signings in the defence. Verbruggen is decent at the same price tag in goal, but Welbeck is still going to be one of those standout options who can be quite streaky, and he started the last campaign very strongly actually up until game week 8 or 9. He scored 10 times in the Premier League last time out with 5 assists, 15 bonus points and 125 FPL points overall. The ownership is a little bit higher actually at 7.9%, but it remains a differential, especially compared to the template picks that you'll see, and a lot of them were covered in my best forwards video actually, and the price tag is still quite reasonable at 6.5 million. But I think with Danny Welbeck he can be overshadowed by Watkins, Isak, Gyökeres, Erling Haaland and a few others there, but at this price tag and below you won't find much better in the forward line. The same goes for Evanilson, the last player covered in this video. He had a decent Premier League campaign last time out, considering it was his first go in this division, with 10 goals and 5 assists, so identical stats to Danny Welbeck, 23 big chances, the same as Strand Larsen, and 128 FPL points. He was also quite decent for bonus points, and he can offer the creativity, solid underlying numbers with big chance created, the expected assists, and more. And the ownership is only 2.5%. I think a lot of people who do start the season with Evanilson or Semenyo might end up benching them in game week 1, but these players are still capable of getting a return in such a difficult fixture. Then it's Wolves at home in game week 2, Tottenham away, and Brighton at home. And despite that 4-1 defeat against Man United, I still think Bournemouth can score goals and create chances. My main fear for them is defensively, and that's why Salah could be the best captaincy option in game week 1. A bonus differential for you is Kai Havertz, and the key question here is, how will the signing of Viktor Gyökeres impact Havertz's minutes and the position he plays in, because he can be deployed as a left central midfielder or essentially a box-to-box sort of role, also as a second striker or attacking midfielder, so that will definitely be very interesting. Does he start over Viktor Gyökeres in game week 1? I wouldn't be completely surprised if that was the case against Man United away, but Havertz's ownership is 1.6%. He got 9 goals and 3 assists after an injury-ridden season, and he missed a few months towards the back end of the last campaign. He also had 23 big chances, and he just failed to get 100 FPL points with 97, but I think he has a lot to offer Arsenal from the bench and also as a starter. I just think Gyökeres will be the main number 9 over time, and that's where you want to invest in the Arsenal forward line, because I think Havertz will be second fiddle in that regard and he won't get as many goals. In pre-season he looked quite decent against Newcastle with 2 assists, and that includes an own goal being forced in by Target actually, but I think Havertz won't be as prolific as he was in 2024, where he had a very solid record for Arsenal, and I think there things were working out a little bit better. In the midfield he simply hasn't done his job, and that's why he has changed that sort of position, and he does have a few qualities which are quite unique, but ultimately Kai Havertz's finishing can be unreliable. Would you consider going for him in game week 1, or do you just prefer Saka and Gyökeres substantially? And even with Saka, I think he's been okay in pre-season, but it's not the very best level we've seen from him, and it might take him a while to get going and reach those kind of levels in terms of performance and output as he was doing up until December when he got injured against Crystal Palace. So there are many question marks about Arsenal, but I think Gyökeres will be a very important signing, and once he gets more game time and rhythm, he's going to make an immediate impact, and Kai Havertz could drop to the bench as a result. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to my channel, and also the notification bell so you're always up to date with my content, whether it's FPL or UCL Fantasy, and we're getting ever closer towards 34,000 subscribers. Follow me on X, Instagram, and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description for my Patreon and the championships, further to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League, and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you very soon for even more FPL content, despite the fact that I'm on holiday, and keep your eyes peeled for the Game Week 1 deadline stream.